Hello, and thank you for joining me, Nick Holt, for this final session of our Automotive Evolution Summit. In this point, we'll be covering future production planning with all the digital tools that entails. And as technology develops at speed, there are some clear opportunities to be had from globally connected manufacturing ecosystems. We're seeing a lot of that across some of the major OEMs at the moment. This session will explore how automotive manufacturers are harnessing and integrating data and utilising digital twins, probably one of the most useful tools we've heard of for a long time, across the whole production process. One area that's very successfully employing these digital tools is production planning. And this is evolving to become more accurate, and in some scenarios, offering simulations that can enhance efficiency, and also support training. To provide some expert insight into this area, I'm joined by a panel of experts that boasts a huge amount of experience. So to start with, we have Nitin Rajurkar from J Global Technical Alliance and Partners. And Nitin has 40 plus years of experience in the automotive industry, particularly in areas of manufacturing engineering, manufacturing operations, new product development, and program management. And he's also held senior positions with OEMs such as Maruti Suzuki, Tata Motors, Mahindra, and VinFast. Following on from Nitin, we have Rabbi Subramanyan, from Director of Industry Solutions at Hive MQ. Ravi is a product manager leader for the company, and his expertise spans industries such as industrial automation, automotive, mobile devices, enterprise communications, and fleet management. He also has technical expertise in data analytics, artificial intelligence, big data, data security, cloud platforms, and agile methodologies. That's a very impressive CV, Ravi. We'll be drawing on a lot of that, I'm sure, in due course. Next up is Vaclav Slavov. He's Global Digital Lead at Automotive for ABB. And he is responsible for ABB's digital solutions and innovations in the automotive Tier 1 segment, focusing on digital strategy, developing new solutions, and supporting digital transformation for ABB customers. And a very interesting segment, Tier 1s, Vaclav. So we'll be interested to hear on your experiences with that. And finally, David Threlfall, who's Chief Information Officer at Britishvolt. David, again, has 30 years of experience of building and leading IT functions in leading global manufacturing and financial organizations. And at Britishvolt, he's responsible for designing and building the IT enterprise architecture and the IT team that will support Britishvolt in its ambitions to producing gigafactories. So thank you all for joining me. As I say, huge amount of experience here and covering a good bit of ground. Moving on to some talk points. We're hearing a lot about digital tools, how they've been deployed, and we've been talking about that across some of our previous sessions. Here we want to focus around that sort of production planning, so where OEMs can get the most benefit from this. I know it's a pretty big subject, but looking at it at the minute, how we see a myriad of different solutions and opportunities, masses of data. So how do you see car makers sort of navigating all the edge computing, robotics, now with AI, time-sensitive networks, clouds, localized, GI, 5G, and we're seeing a lot of connectivity. There's so many kind of tools, opportunities, systems out there at the minute, which offer potentially solutions to a lot of the challenges that they have at the minute. How do you see them navigating that? I mean, what's the kind of steps and processes you would expect that they would be undertaking to integrate something like some of these systems into their approach? And Nitin, if I may, I'll come to you first. Obviously, you've worked across a number of OEMs, obviously in production planning, and I'm guessing with your span of experience, you've kind of seen it all from the less digital side of it to now where we're at with all these tools at the disposal. So what's your sort of sense of?
Yeah. So, hi. This what I can see. This yes, what you rightly said. That I seen both the sides, kind of a less digital side when I started working for automotives, and now it's becoming more and more digital. The AI applications, to give an example, AI came to auto industry primarily from product side, where a lot of product-driven features entered in the car. But now I see AI is also getting into manufacturing planning part. That's something which is very interesting, and I see a lot of application. I use maybe once we have more and more discussion, I can give some real life example. But one of the prominent example I am personally very happy to talk about is about the inspection. A lot of inspection activities are now taken over by robotics because of this AI deployment. That's something which is very interesting development which has happened in auto industry. That's happening in paint shop, that's happening in vehicle assembly shop, that's happening in powertrain shop, battery shop. Almost kind of every shop AI is taking over in a lot of critical job which previously people used to do. And that has added, it's not just a replacement, it is added a lot of value. For example, in the paint shop, when we started doing the kind of inspection of a painted body with this AI application, we are able to pick up many fine details which otherwise a man was not able to pick up. This is just one example I just picked up. Similarly, there are other areas where a lot of activities are happening. For example, what I talk about this cloud computing. Cloud has really become a kind of a blessing because we generate huge amount of data every time I move the car. Every time I tighten the torque, every time I do any activity, I generate data, and each data has got a lot of meaning. And all that data together, this cloud computing is very useful for that. And there is a big work happening on the background in the kind of a control room, which is able to analyze the data and then it's like a nervous system for the whole factory. So this is something which I just picked up some example to start with. Yeah.
Thanks, Nitin, and absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, as you say, I mean, end-of-line inspection. I mean, inspection full stop being able to be automated and with a high degree of accuracy. And you mentioned there AI being introduced, cloud computing, that shifting those and connecting those huge amounts of data. Again, a lot we hear about. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing that, you know, as you say, now with the data, you need somewhere to communicate it and pass it around. And I'll come on to Ravi if I may. Ravi. That's kind of what you guys do is kind of make that connection to manage that amount of data and in a way kind of simplify it. And again, your experience working with automotive clients and Nitin mentioned there the amount of data that they have,
right?
And also sorting that information out, you know, categorizing it, making sure it's in the right place for them. I mean, what's your view on the steps that your customers are, what are the things they're asking for, and what do you see the steps that they are sort of taking in this area?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question. Just piggybacking on what Nitin said, right? I think more and more OEMs we see are using the power of the cloud, because I think the cloud is here to stay. I know back in the days, there was kind of like, especially in manufacturing, anything that goes outside the manufacturing facility was frowned upon. But I think now, given the amount of security that we have and the optimizations that have happened, especially on edge networks, and the ability to store and forward, if you will, meaning like exception-based reporting as opposed to I'm just going to send everything to the cloud, which is not feasible, especially given the high costs of cellular and other mechanisms to send the data. Now there is a lot of functionality to kind of like do edge processing, because in a lot of cases with the manufacturing, things need to happen right away. Meaning like you see an anomaly, you detect an anomaly, it needs to be corrected right away. So the cloud is not the right place for you to handle that, right? It has to happen at the edge of the network, as we like to call it. And then there are certain things that can go to the cloud. For example, more longer term trending, if you will, right? Comparison of different factories that you might have within your facilities and how they're doing from a production process, for example, right? I think Nitin mentioned about inspection. That's another big thing, right? So back in the days, not too long ago, it all used to be done with pen and paper, right? And a lot of those things got lost over time. digitizing all of that, creating a single pane of glass where all the systems within your factory network can talk to each other. That's kind of like where a broker, an MQTT broker like HiveMQ comes in, right? Where we're able to talk to each and every system, be it factory machines, be it ERP systems, be it SCADA systems, be it MES systems, because a combination of all of this is what really helps you optimize your process and make things more better for AI, ML, either on the edge or on the cloud, or to be able to just do general reporting, right? Compliance, because compliance is becoming big. You want to make sure that you have records of all of the things that you've done, if you will, in terms of inspection, in terms of all the optimizations that you've done, so that like you can easily, when being audited, you can provide all that information, right? So this is where I think the data gathering and data availability is a big deal. And then that data needs to be secure, that data needs to be reliable and available when needed. And that's kind of like where our solution comes in. So that's kind of my take on that, Nick.
Thanks, Ravi. And it's interesting, the management of data. I struggle with what's on my computer, but the management of data is absolutely sort of key to this, and the way that it's kind of structured and delivered. Because we, in the past, I don't think it's quite so much the case now, but car makers have been overwhelmed. They've been able to gather a lot from production operations, but then to be able to utilize it effectively has been more of a challenge. Vaclav, if I can come to you next, you're working. If I can draw on your experience working in with like the tier suppliers in the respect of this, yeah, they're I mean, if you think about it, their kind of units that they're producing is in the millions sometimes, depending on a component level, and they have a lot of highly automated processes and ones that require a high degree of accuracy and consistency. I mean, because of the volumes of things, I think they're quite a unique case study when it comes to the kind of manufacturing side of it. But of course, data management for them is just as important. And of course, they're looking to be more flexible at the moment. So being able to plan ahead. Do you see the adoption of this working in a similar way as it might do for a vehicle maker, or are there differences or different priorities that they have?
Yeah, I think it's very much similar. Yeah, of course, also for tier ones, the same way as for the OEMs, the data are, let's say, very important, and they are trying to collect. What I can see now on the market, I think it's some kind of trend moving from this big, let's say, digital industry 4.0 program to rather, let's say, smaller, well-defined projects which should deliver specific value. Because at the beginning, basically, everybody was looking into this industry 4.0 digitalization with the, let's say, like as a big opportunity, and everybody was pushing big programs across, whole company and so on. And suddenly it turned out that it's not really useful to collect everything and then to see what will happen. But rather, now we see that customers are moving to, let's say, well-defined smaller projects to wait if the value will be there. And then, of course, they would like to scale it up as soon as the value is confirmed. Also, I think, the tier ones, they are under huge pressure because of their customers, OEMs, then they have to deliver to the end customer, the car. So definitely it's critical for them, to focus in the specific areas like performance, quality, to make sure that they will not be penalized. Yeah? And this is where they are putting their focus. But to use the data in the best way possible, I think they also realized that it's important to build some kind of internal teams, because to understand the data, you have to know the process itself. And it's very, very important to have the people who are looking into the data with the specific process knowledge, with the, let's say, factory knowledge, which is producing that specific part. And I see that this is more and more coming in, that the tier ones are building really dedicated team of data scientists rather than, focusing outside to the market.
That's really interesting, because obviously it's just data without that experience of understanding the context and the application of it with those experts. And while we're kind of on the subject of big and small projects, we'll come to David, if I may. David, I know, is working on the project for building the Gigafactory with Britishvolt. And I know, speaking from him previously, this is kind of like from a ground up building. So David's the chief information officer and is building that IT infrastructure that's going through. So David, for you, it's more about the approach you have is more about how you structure what you build in, what it will cover off. And I suppose the data's not there at the minute, but it's kind of how you're going to manage that and across all of the production and logistics operations that you were building into the plant that's I believe Northumberland in the UK. So a big project there, and you've got that's a huge scope. So your experience on that in terms of steps that you're taking.
Yeah, it's an interesting one from our point of view. We're slightly different, coming from a slightly different position, as you say. But clearly, you know, it's with us. It starts with the product design collaboration with OEM partners. You know, starting at the ground, we talk about walking hand in hand with our customers, designing the products. So the products, the battery products that we are designing to be able to manufacture from 24 onwards are going to go into vehicles that are being designed to get on the road for, you know, 27, 28 onwards. So it's a great opportunity for us to be at ground zero in terms of being a design partner, and our technology stack, as you say, we're building it from the ground up. So we're architecting and building everything. So we're in a digital world, in effect. You know, we've relied on. We were born in COVID, right? So we were not location specific, and we've designed our R&D scientists. Our team have designed product to get to A and shortly B sample in a digital world, right? So. So that's the basis of data, and then as we think about how we will interact with our OEM partners, certainly as we talk later on around planning, it starts with a common product design. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, David. Just this is another kind of one of those broader questions, but I mean, in terms of specifics, and David, if I might actually start with you again on this one, if I may, in terms of with the project you're working on with Britishvolt at the moment, what are the kind of you mentioned there designing around, you know, the product and then obviously the implementation of the manufacturing, etc. But what are the key technologies that you've come across that are now supporting that? Because you've got a huge amount of experience in the industry, and you've probably seen all sides of the levels of technology and support and the tools that you have to work with. Now, what are the key tools you're kind of seeing, key technologies that are supporting
you? Certainly digital simulation and twinning. So simulation, because you can't have a digital twin until you've got a physical product, right? So but it starts with modeling and simulation. Previously mentioned on product design, that's one side of our simulation. But also, you know, we're building a digital simulation that will develop into a twin when the factory is built. But the current idea for simulating right now is just to make sure our processes and equipment actually work. Right, there's no way of testing that out and in a physical manner, right? If you think about some of this equipment is 200-300 meters long and extremely complex. You know, the digital tools that are available via our strategic business partners have been absolutely key to us. I mean, if we think about the scale of the proposed giga plant in Camas in Northumberland, you know, you can fit 50 full-size football pitches in that factory. It's an extremely large, and in fact, it's the 4th largest construction ever in the UK. So we've got to be really sure that logistically, even it's feasible for operators to get from point A to point B, just because of the scale. So it's even getting to that level of surety. So we're working on some assumed data, but a lot of data that will actually come from the equipment that we're procuring, making some assumptions. But getting that basic model, that simulation model, right now for our assumptions and planning and costings is absolutely key.
Thanks, David. And I'd like to put the same question to Nitin, because you mentioned you were talking about some areas of sort of OEM operations. So what do you see as like some key specific technologies that you're seeing as kind of enabling like forward planning, more accuracy, better data management? I mean, you can identify a couple of areas in the production operation from your sort of recent experience.
Yeah, definitely. What we mentioned about simulation, digital twinning is one of the key for planning of any factory. That's something come as a very good tool for a planner like me, where I am able to kind of make all the trials much in advance before actually putting the money in investment and making some mistakes. That's used to happen in past, but now all that we are able to check whether these things are going to work or not. Robotics, 3D printing, IoT, I can say, especially for capturing real-time data, cloud computing. That's for definitely a lot of huge potential for integrating the supply chains. Then AI, I already talked about. 5G is because of the connectivity and so many sensors in the factory, the connecting. So I see a lot of technologies coming up, including the cybersecurity. These are the kind of key technologies what I can just list out, which definitely I see good potential for any future factory for which is coming up. In fact, they are for the Industry 4.0 standards.
Thanks, Ravi. It's surprising actually. When I listen to these kind of comments around digital twin simulation and the management of data, I'm always amazed actually that how factories got made and we plan production lines or even reconfigured production lines before this. I'm sure it was just a challenge. If I can move on to a question which I will put to all of you, I think it is. We just discussed a huge, and Nitin sort of highlighted it, the huge sort of amount of tools that are now available that you can use, and David was saying there what they're putting into practice. But what do you see as, in terms of the deployment of these and the adoption of these, the kind of main two areas really? What's the main accelerator? And it could be, I think we probably would all agree to some degree now, it's the drive towards electrification, because we're transforming the product, if you want to call it that, for a lot of car makers and a lot of tier suppliers. But also, what do you see as the kind of decelerator? What's the thing that's putting the brakes on some of them adopt? Because it sounds like there's just a treasure trove of stuff out there, so why not use it? But clearly, I know from speaking to car makers and tier suppliers, they are a very pragmatic bunch. They don't just use everything because they can. So what's the kind of sort of the push and the pull on that? Ravi, I'll come to you first on that, if I may.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate the question. So in terms of accelerators, like you said, there's a lot of macro factors that are certainly accelerating the push to digitization, right? I think like some of it has been touched upon, like the push to electrification, with the need for better batteries. I think somebody mentioned additive technology, to allow mass customizations, the push to get to zero carbon, right? I mean, the sustainability initiatives that are happening in the automotive manufacturing, like many other areas of manufacturing, right? And last but not least, the push to more fuel efficient vehicles, more lightweight vehicles, and things like that, which means that the manufacturing lines need to be modified to adapt to it. I think people mentioned about digital twins. So like these digital technologies are allowing you to test things without having to disrupt your manufacturing line too much, right? So those are the accelerators, I would say, are the ones that are there. In terms of decelerators, right? What I would say some of the decelerators is non-technology really, because you have to have, like, if you want to implement a Industry 4.0 project, or if you want to do a factory modernization project, right? The first thing you need to have is you need to have management buy-in, right? If the management is not bought into it, if it is not part of their charter for the next 2 years or so, and if you're a champion within your factory and you're trying to do some stuff, You can potentially get some benefits out of that through like some small trials, for example. But if you really want to take it to the next level and you want to implement it across your factory or across your organization, you're going to hit roadblocks, because there is really not a management buy into the process, because there is investment involved, right? Obviously, the first thing that people will ask is like, why are we doing this? Why are we changing that's not broken? What is the ROI, the return of investment on this, right? And that could be because of like the organizational structures and then the inability to break across the barriers and things like that, right? So management buy-in is important. You clearly a lack of champion could also be a decelerator, right? Because if you don't have one person that says, I'm the one that is like trying to get the digital transformation going across the organization, as opposed to multiple different pockets of activities that are happening, that is going to lose steam very soon, right? I mentioned about ROI, the inability to establish ROI in a project where I'm spending some money, but I don't know what my return is and how soon my return will be, right? So to be able to clearly identify that and see those things in action is important, because organizations are kind of like broken up. Like factory, you have like different data silos, for example. I did mention about our technology trying to break those data silos and bring the data together. That could be an impediment. And again, cost, complexity of implementation, these are other areas that could be decelerators. So that's my perspective.
Thanks, Ravi. Vaclav, if I may, come to you. Obviously, again, I can't draw on your tier supplier perspective on that. I mean, as Ravi pointed out there, there's always cost. You always need to make a business case, whether it's a robot or whether it's a large software platform. And I think in some respects that premise hasn't changed. But maybe it's maybe it's easier to make a business plan for I need 10 robots than it is for I need a software platform. But I mean, we touched on a little bit about, you know, the need that they have now for the transparency in their production operations, and we'll get onto the sort of bit of the planning stuff. But I mean, your experience with the tier suppliers you've been working with, what are the kind of the pushes and the pulls that are helping and hindering them when it comes to adoption of the kind of planning and digital tools?
Yeah, I think just to follow up on the business case remark, you know, I think innovation at the end of the day for, let's say, the factory manager or for the decision maker is, innovation means to produce cheaper or in the higher quality. And this is all about, because every single innovation, it's really nice, really cool. There are a lot of interesting technologies, but at the end of the day, there must be, business case, which means to produce cheaper or in the higher quality. And I mean, the accelerators inside of tier ones, but also inside of OEMs, there is no really single one. Yeah, it's a combination of different things. As David mentioned, now since we are transforming to the EV platforms, we are designing and building the lines for the brand new products like a battery trays, battery itself, e-drives, whatever. Yeah. So this is one thing. Product itself is pushing this, acceleration of the digital adoption. But also there are different things like, people itself. Yeah. Because now there is a new generation, and for sure they want to, let's say, look into the SCADA screens, as 20 years ago. They would like to also work in certain environment, the similar one as they have at home, a lot of smart things, a lot of visibility. But also on the other side, they expect some kind of ease of use, everywhere. So what I can see, the young generation, they are not so eager to go into the code, and do some coding. So ease of use definitely is pushing also these digital tools, because to somehow create the ease of use, I mean, ease of use for robot programming, for data collection, whatever, you have to really accelerate the digital tools, yeah, because you have to do a lot of stuff autonomously or automatically. Yeah?
Thanks, Vaclav. And David, if I may come to you, because if I, in my opinion, for you, it's all accelerated, because these tools are obviously facilitating massively what you're trying to do. But I mean, in your experience, is that the case? Or are there some sort of, if we take cost out of it, from a practical application and adoption, and I say there's a degree of pragmatism when you're doing it. You can't just take everything. You have to decide. So is that the case? Is it all accelerators for you?
It's certainly enablers.
Yeah.
I'll use that term. And if I think about what's driving a real necessity, a no-brainer to adopt digital planning tools or technology that helps us plan digitally. If you think about the state of global supply chain at the moment, I mean, we've talked for years and years about a visible end-to-end visibility of supply chain and value chain. Yeah, never has there been a time where we need to really live that, right? And we need to really kind of rewrite the traditional rules around how we connect with our value chain. So all the way back from source of products. So you've certainly got certainty, or as much certainty as possible, around supply chain, and that's even very, very early indication of any issues in the supply chain, be it a ship stuck in the Suez Canal or a conflict somewhere. And to me, the only way of doing that is to have open digital relationships with your partners. I think a real challenge, if I call it that, to allow that to happen is all around data, quality of data, standardization of data, and availability and nervousness around security of data. Right, we really need to get over those issues.
Thanks, David. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, if I may. But Nitin, again, just back to you on this, because obviously you're seeing, again, working with the OEMs, I think working with VinFast at the moment, but obviously you've worked across a number of OEMs in the past, and you've seen the integration and the deployment of some of these things. But I mean, if we take, again, I'll try and avoid cost, because I think that's kind of it is a factor, but it's not, I think in a practical application approach, where do you see, you mentioned some real benefits, the tools out there that have been hugely beneficial across the production lines. Where do you see that push, that drive, and what do you see inhibiting, in your experience, car makers from actually adopting some of these, what would seem ideal solutions?
See, the benefits are fantastic. Like most of the speakers so far covered, I fully agree with that. See, there are what's happened now. We are able to combine a lot of. We are able to make a flexible lines. We are able to do a lot of reduction of manpower, or I can say efficient. We are able to design a line much efficiently, and by replacing with good amount of automation on the line. That's something which is, for example, earlier we used to have a lot of huge battery of people in the assembly lines. Body shop, yes, always is. It has started becoming automated body shop maybe 15 years back, but vehicle assembly lines were still huge manpower oriented. But now I see a lot of automation coming in the vehicle assembly also, even paint shops also, and that has really made not only the cost reduction, but it has given a kind of a consistent quality. That's something was very important. So what has pushed is it has pushed the quality. It has also improved what I call is a return on investment because of that. And it has also given me some kind of a reliability of my what I'm making in terms of the output what I'm getting. Then, like I touched earlier, that I'm getting kind of a one-shot picture of all the quality parameters when my car is getting dispatched. I have a complete genealogy of that car, how that car is getting built from every station. And in case I face some problem in the field, I can refer back whether this particular bolt, which was torque, when the car was getting torqued, whether it was torqued to that correct specification or not, that kind of a checking I can do with respect to that. So there are many benefits which are coming up. Now I'll more talk about what is limitations from practical industry practical point of view, because practically when I'm doing for a new program, a completely new line for EV, that job is a bit easier because that's a clean slate. And but the problem started when we have a mixed line or a completely old line to be upgraded or revamped. That's where a big challenge, because not everybody has a luxury of putting a completely new line. So many OEMs they tend to kind of upgrade the old line, and upgrading the old line, many of the equipments doesn't have so much of a kind of a inbuilt kind of a sensors or kind of a facilities which are in those equipments, and that's where we have a very tough time to integrate all those equipments. And again, coming back to EV, even if I go for EV with a clean slate approach, I can quote one or two examples. I'll not name the OEM, but I know this particular OEM, when they started upgrading this for automation for the vehicle assembly line, they thought about you know this headliner for the car. The car has got this headliner, and the typical headliner mounting process is like a completely manual process in every car, where man goes inside the car, sit inside the car, and try to kind of assemble. It is very kind of a tedious and I can say a bit of a hassle involved in that. So when company decided to automate it, the bigger challenge was it cannot be automated with the same design. They had to go back to the design board and change the product design and change the kind of a structure, how it was mounted. Then only that automation was possible. So the message is that the hindrance factor, we have to go back right up to the kind of a product at a root stage. Then only all these automations can be supported. That's what I just trying to convey here. Same thing about the bolts. Some company was trying to assemble the kind of some bolts. Those bolts were kind of the robo with that accuracy was not able to kind of go reach to that exact hole position in the assembly line. But then they modified the product design by tapering the bolt so that that moment of that accuracy that is taken care by that bolt taper. So those kind of adjustments are required right up to the product design, and that's where I think people just cannot just imagine that I put money in automation and I put money in kind of all those nice systems and start getting the advantage. It's not that. It starts with much earlier in right up to kind of my drawing boards. That's of importance. Yeah.
Thanks, Nitin. That's a good example. So I mean, you know, the upgrading of kind of legacy plants. I mean, legacy operations can cause a challenge. And interesting, you said that. I mean, that's a really interesting one. Doesn't matter how good the sophisticated the automation is, if the design of the vehicle doesn't suit it, then I mean, that's a really key point. And we do see quite a lot of that at the minute. We are seeing a lot of that conversation about how far upstream in terms of the actual design of the vehicle in relation to its engineering and its manufacturing should be undertaken. And to exactly your point there, to avoid those kind of issues down the line. And interestingly, talking to tier suppliers who wish they were much more involved in the upstream involvement in design, so it makes they can make their parts and systems that bit easier. I think I just wanted to kind of come back to David's point that he made earlier on, and I think, you know, I'll ask all again. It seems a bit laborious, but I do want to get all your insights because I think the perspectives are really interesting. But it's a question that's kind of cropped up for the last few years, really. Whenever we've spoken to people around, and it doesn't matter whether they're car makers, tier suppliers, or service or solution suppliers on a digital level, is data management is an issue. And David mentioned there also standardization. And again, we might come back to David in a minute because, again, planning that whole plant, he's probably got quite a unique perspective, but all of you have got some experience of this and your views on it. Are you still seeing certain companies in certain areas, and I don't ask you to name names, but is data management still an issue depending on, it must vary operation to operation in terms of the data they get out of it, but is it still an issue? Is it being simplified? And do you see the lack of standardization sometimes in software, the platforms, the protocols being a challenge and a problem in that respect? So I'll go to Ravi actually on this one. I think because obviously data management is something that your business is involved in.
And I'll try to keep it brief because obviously we want to get the perspective of everyone here, right? So absolutely, right. If we say that everybody solved the data management problem, that is quite not the case, because I think OEMs, I think the manufacturing process is getting more and more complex, right? The organizational structures have not quite kept up with it. There are still a lot of silos, as we call it, data silos. I think Nitin brought up this whole concept of like greenfield versus brownfield. So as they keep adding more things to the line, the existing line, that exacerbates the problem, meaning like it makes it worse, right? So meaning there's going to be still data sitting across all of these different locations. And the sum total of that is what is really going to help them get to the whole Industry 4.0 dream that they have, as opposed to trying to do few projects here and there. And that's where like a product like HiveMQ comes in, where we are able to identify, first of all, where all the data is, where are the machine data sitting, where is the PLC data sitting, where is the MES data, where is the database data, like identify all of these different data that you actually need to be able to successfully do your Industry 4.0 projects based on like what you're trying to achieve, be it cost reduction, be it gain more efficiency, be it process automation, whatever it be, right? And then trying to put together simple and easy solutions, reliable solutions that will suck all the data from these different locations, bring it to a centralized repository like a broker, and then making that available for whatever use cases you want it to be used for, right? And then what happens is anytime you add a new source of data, it's going to be very easy because all the subscribers are going to be able to get updates on any new data, and that's kind of like part of the MQTT technology, right? That allows this to happen. So that's my take on this.
Thanks, Ravi. And if I can just come quickly to you, Dave, we've got a few more minutes. I'm going to steal another 5 minutes from the organisers, so don't worry. But I've got a couple of other questions. But David, if I can come to you again, because you kind of raised that, and I'm sorry if I come back to you, but it's because of the scope of what you're doing. You're starting arguably from a clean sheet of paper with this. So your overview on it is it's not you can identify where maybe those roadblocks are, and you've obviously, as with a lot of our panel, experience over the years of different companies operating in different ways, being relatively new to this with the data management. And you mentioned standards there, or standardization. So could you just give us a bit of feedback on where you see that, or the requirements for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a different perspective, right? And it is in the EV world, and we haven't mentioned the end consumer and what part they play in the planning process. We now, it is common practice for us all to design our vehicle online. It's also, unfortunately, fairly common now to wait at least 12 months for your vehicle. So how do you keep that consumer, that end customer engaged? And you do that by giving your manufacturing process give that data, make that data visible to the consumer, as well as when the vehicle is actually in the possession of the driver. It's this whole connected life experience with the vehicle, and also now needing to understand the provenance and the carbon performance of the vehicle. That's all the same data generated from the manufacturing process, right? And those standards, and there is so that you will never hear a CIO ever say data is no longer a problem, right? It's always a problem because it's a changing landscape. So that's my perspective on that. Hope that answers.
Thanks, David. I mean, I think it's an interesting one again, because we see it cycling around as, everything, every time we think we've got something fixed, or from a journalist point of view, that we know that now, and it isn't. It's across the board. Things change and move. One last question, and I'm going to direct this to Vaclav, because you raised it in the conversations that we had prior to this, and it's a bit more sort of forward-looking. And one of it was around this sort of planning topic, but was Vaclav, it was dynamic planning. We discussed that, and the kind of challenges around that, and maybe the way that the way it's facilitated. So we've got just a few more minutes left, but if you could just give us a bit of an outline about what the benefits are, what it might be, what context for it, and you mentioned there again as we were coming down about some challenges around that. Would you just give us a little insight into that?
Yeah, I think for sure it's pretty clear that the flexibility, will be the future driver. I can, quote one of our customers. He said already 2 years ago that flexibility will drive the profitability. Sorry, not productivity, but profitability. And basically, flexibility, I think there are certain level of flexibility. Of course, I would like to get rid of all the fixed, let's say, equipment like the conveyors, replace it with the AGVs, AMRs, and so on. Of course, it's adding me the flexibility. I would like to make my machines more flexible. But then I think the next level, this ultimate flexibility, means really I would like to adjust my production line on the fly. That means in case that I see somewhere the problem, I would like to run through different operations. I would like to run through different production cells, whatever. So really to apply this dynamic planning and dynamic scheduling on the fly directly to the production line or to the warehouse. Yeah. And I think that's really great question, at the end to ask all our let's say, viewers. Do you see that really the traditional, actually, business, which is automotive, will transfer into this dynamic, let's say, simulation or dynamic scheduling directly on the production line, and will trust that system will basically be able to deliver the required results? Because I can see, again, which I quoted already before, there is a combination. There is a product at the beginning, then there is a hardware, software, digital tools, but then also we have a people, which we have still on the line. And to dynamically schedule the people, it's always a little bit tricky.
Thanks, Vaclav. That's a really interesting thing. The idea, I mean, it's obviously slightly, but the tools we seem to have would seem to be able to facilitate that. I am unfortunately going to have to bring this session to a close. I'm really sorry. It's great. Thank you very much for all your input and insights. Much appreciated. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this final session. It's been very good, very informative. With that, I'll just say thanks very much.
Well, everyone, that's it for the AMS Automotive Evolution Summit. What a great way to end there. I mean, looking to a positive future, looking to the opportunities that digital twins and technology have to offer. And I mean, I think our audience has probably had enough of the two of us, Nick, but so we won't subject them to too much more. But it would be a missed opportunity to reflect a little bit on some of the things we heard on day 3, putting them in the context of the whole overall event. I mean, I started off day 1 talking about speed of change, pace, that threaded through everything that was discussed. But I think today, where we really spent some time talking about digitalization in more detail around data analytics, machine learning, AI, as well as sustainability, I think here we got to the crux of the matter, if you like, the real mission and objectives that this industry is increasingly moving towards, and the way automotive production is supporting it. I see the sustainability discussion in particular as really the North Star for the industry and particularly manufacturing. When we spoke earlier with Polestar's Hans Persson, who compared the Polestar Zero project, which is to eliminate full life cycle emissions on a product by 2030, as comparing it to the Apollo mission, right, and getting to the moon and back safely. I think it is ambitions of that level. I feel that's a real motivating objective that can pull together all the disparate, complicated pieces of the manufacturing and supply chain and really focus it. And there's a lot of unknowns within that. But as he pointed out, all options stay on the table. If we take a material mix, for example, it's not clear to say, carbon fiber or aluminium over steel or this. In fact, when you taking in factors like recyclability into the mix, it changes the picture. And there we had a steel supplier right next to him in SSAB, acknowledging the challenges, but really willing to work together on that. I think one of my favorite quotes actually probably came from Thomas Hodenfeld from SSAB, who said, surprisingly, perhaps to many, one of his goals is to sell less steel. Now that might sound like something his board not want to hear, but in fact, if you think of one of the other overarching themes of our event, of value over volume, this is an industry that already is learning to live with less from a production point of view in terms of the availability of materials. The industry's business model has to move in that direction. Not just serving customers with metal, with more widgets, with more. The service and value add is shifting, whether to services, to software, but also, again, scaling it back to production, really making the most out of everything, really understanding the objectives. And when you get to the production, really interesting debates there around dematerialization, where you retain value in the overall chain. So I think those topics really just emerge, and then threading it right through to the last couple of sessions, looking at data analytics and machine learning, and now digital twins. Real common thread is knowing where the competitive lines are. And as some of our panelists previously made, in many cases, the data manufacturing isn't really a competitive area. It can be an area where we can learn to share, gain more insights, make better decisions across the production chain. And so that for me was really key in terms of just knowing where we could be sharing and making the data protocols easier to share. Those are some key highlights for me just at the end of our day. Nick, maybe to conclude, what were a couple of things which really stood out to you?
I think maybe it summed up a little bit with the interview with Tata this morning. Choices. And OEMs have a lot of choices. We talked about materials there in terms of battery, in terms of digital tools. We both had sessions with that. And there is a huge raft of tools and opportunities, materials that are going to facilitate the manufacturing of cars. Ironically, when we talk to OEMs, they don't like a lot of choice. It overcomplicates the process. But it's a good job they've got these tools, because when you look at the complexity, and you mentioned sustainability there, and we had a fascinating session on recycling, battery recycling, something that's kind of we haven't covered. It was kind of new to me, a lot of it. When we were speaking to the guys, there's a huge challenge opportunity as well there, working to replace all these batteries, to recover all those materials. But it's not an easy one, and it's another factor actually, which is not separate to the automotive industry. It's part of this whole package that we've been looking for across today, in the last 3 days, of trying to transition to these electric vehicles is a massive task. And it goes beyond just building the cars themselves on a production line. And we're seeing much wider responsibilities, implications, costs, complications. But also what we've seen is a huge amount of adaptability, flexibility, which is what the production line want, but from our panelists and from the company, also innovation. I mean, that's probably at the bottom line of it. The innovation, and we're not talking radical change. There's a good degree of pragmatism whenever you speak to anybody, whatever it's supplier, OEM, tier supplier, that there's a very pragmatic approach to it. But the skill set and the mindset are there. And I'm always slightly in awe of all of these people whenever I'm speaking to them. So it's been very enlightening, I think.
Absolutely, and thanks again to every one of our speakers and guests who joined us. We had more than 30 over the last 3 days. The good news for many of you who couldn't possibly take all the time out of your busy days to watch that all live is that everything is available on demand. So firstly, anyone who's registered on the platform, you can watch everything back on the agenda page, including this session will be uploaded shortly. So go back, you've got time for that. We will also be sharing this across the AMS page, the AMS website. So check back there as well for more and a lot more coverage and reporting, which our team at AMS continues to cover. But we have a lot more coming up that I'd like to just briefly talk to you about. But first, before that, I'd like to also thank our sponsors for their collaboration and more than anything for their input on this event. As we keep saying, they have specialist services and technologies that support so many of the challenges that we spent the last 3 days talking about. In fact, that we talk about every day at AMS across our website. So again, those sponsors: MagSwitch, ArcelorMittal, SSAB, Conductus Wampler, Atlas Copco, Hive MQ, Hexagon, and Second Mind. You've heard from many of them. You can still connect with them on the platform if you're still here. We'll keep that live. But again, anything further you want to know, you can find resources through AMS, or of course directly. We're happy to make connections. As I always say, and I say to our team all the time, we're not just a moment in time. We have a lot more to share with you every day, every week. We put out, whether it's content, but also with these digital panels and discussions that we're doing, including our live stream series, which comes to you every month via the AMS website. Our next live stream on connected manufacturing and building connected networks and therefore more predictable futures. That'll take place on June 30th. So, we'll go to the AMS website. You'll be able to register for that very soon and find out more about what we'll be talking there. You can also get in touch with our team if you want more information on that or any other of the live streams that we have planned. And I'm also, really excited to talk about our event later this year, which we've spoken about as well. An in-person version or a hybrid version of our event where we'll be in Munich, bringing together some of the speakers that you've heard from over the last 3 days, and of course many more new ones as well. So really looking forward to that. Get in touch. A couple of our speakers, as I said, are already confirmed. Peter Weber from BMW, who we heard from right at the beginning, and Arno Gullering from ZF, who we spoke to yesterday, all about empowering people and reskilling people in the transition to electrified powertrains. Couple of other events from across our sister portfolios here. AMS is part of a group which also is publishing and covering the automotive logistics and supply chain industry. And we've got a couple of events coming up, including next month in California on finished vehicle logistics, later in the year in Detroit in the US on North American global industry, in Mexico. Those are all relative to the supply chain. And we're also part of a group that covers the car design, automotive design. So if car design is an area that you're passionate about and you understand how importantly and how much that can link as well to manufacturing, do check out our platform, Car Design News, and feel free, or hopefully you'll consider joining us for some other events too. We have an online awards session for China. We'll also be in Los Angeles later in the year in November at the LL Motor Show, where we hold a forum. And in London at the end of the year, we have a special awards program there. So those are just some further events. We hope you'll consider joining us where you find them relevant. That is it from us. And again, just really the thanks goes to you as much as anything for following along, and hope you'll stay in touch and share more with us along the way. So this is Christopher Ludwig and Nick Holt here, signing off from London at the end of 3 busy days of AMS Automotive Evolution. Thanks so much for being with us.